All right, we're live. Thank you, everybody, for coming back to watch the Entrepreneur Hour. Today, my special guest is Samelys Lopez. She is running for Congress this year for, I forget the district, but I always start the show by talking about how I met the person. I believe I know I've seen you around many places because you've been around in the Bronx for a while. But I believe the first time we actually spoke was I was doing an art exhibition at this apartment. This guy knew I was doing augmented reality, so he asked me to do an art piece. So I made an art piece of the Bronx that when you hold up your phone to it, it turned on fire. And you came to the art show and we spoke and we met that time. You asked me about the piece, and then we see each other here and there. But then I see you're running for office, and my friend AOC backed you, and I know her story. So tell the people your story. I want to know like where you're from, what you wanted to do growing up, and then how'd you get into politics.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on your show. So my name is Samelys Lopez, and I'm running for the 15th Congressional District of the South Bronx. This is a district that has been led by Jose Serrano for the past 30 years, and unfortunately, he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's. So there's going to be an election on June 23rd to replace him and figure out who the next congressional representative will be for the area. So that's the seat that I'm running for. And I was born in Bayamon, Puerto Rico. My dad was from Naranjito. My mother's an Afro-Dominican woman from Duvergé, and she was raised in Barahona in the Dominican Republic. So I'm Puerto Rican and Dominican, very proud of my African roots and my Latina culture that I always showcase with pride. And my mom was a seamstress. And when she divorced my dad in Puerto Rico, she came here to this country to make ends meet. And she worked in sweatshops to basically support us. And many times there were oftentimes, you know, situations where we couldn't get money for a babysitter wasn't available. So then she would pick me up from my elementary school, and then I would do my homework at the sweatshop, with my mom and her coworkers. And that's something that real that happened to me when I was growing up. And then unfortunately, she ended up being a domestic violence survivor when she met my stepfather here, and the abuse ended up going for a long time, for years. And then finally, she had enough of it one night, and at midnight, she basically said, we had enough. And then we were on the street that night, and it was two formerly homeless activists that walked up to us because my mother was crying, and they were asking me, well, what's wrong with your mom? Because my mom doesn't speak English to this day. So as an 8-year-old, I was basically translating everything that happened that night. We didn't have anywhere to go. And then basically they took us in, and they're like, we're going to take you to where you can get some help. And then they basically took us to a shelter facility where we ended up staying. So I grew up in the homeless shelter system after that experience. And because of my early experiences in life, that always motivated me to fight for the underdog, to fight for social justice, to fight for community organizing, to fight for the unheard, the unseen, because of everything that happened to my mom and I when we were growing up and trying to make it in this country. And then around the time that we were 10, that I was 10 years old, we ended up leaving the shelter system, and then we moved to the 15th Congressional District in the Bronx. And then that was a breath of fresh air because we ended up starting fresh, like a new apartment, a new home. And I went to McCombs Junior High School 82, University Avenue in Tremont on McCombs Road. And that basically set me on the path to a new beginning. And then I went on to college. I went to Barnard College. Then I interned for Congressman Serrano, and then he hired me as a congressional aide. So I have a very good understanding of the inner workings of a congressional office. And then I went on to work for his son, where I directed constituent services for a time. I would help out with housing and immigration casework. And then what I would see is that the people that were coming up to us for eviction cases, I would help them secure what's called a one-shot deal. And then what I found is that the same people that wanted, eviction grants, through the welfare office, 6 months, 7 months down the road, they will come back again to the office with the same issue. I was like, as much as I love working for Serrano, I don't feel like I'm making a dent in the affordable housing crisis. So then I went on and I ended up getting a master's in urban planning from New York University with a focus in community and housing development. so I can understand about the development process, zoning process, so I can be a part of the creative process of how to build housing, from acquiring sites to financing housing to getting the buildings opened up for people who were once in the situation that my mom, my brother, and I were once in, living on the streets, living in a shelter, and basically building housing for really vulnerable populations. And then I've also been a community activist, a political activist that has been trying to build independent grassroots political power outside of the Bronx Democratic Party for the past few years. And that led me to help co-found an organization called Bronx Progressives, which is basically democratizing the democratic process here, the political process, training people on how to run for county committee, district leader, state committee, so that we can identify local people to run for these positions and transform the party from within, so that the party can be more reflective of the values and the needs of the community. Because I strongly believe that it's directly impacted people with their lived experiences that need to guide policy making and need to have a leadership role in politics. So then, through that, we ended up meeting Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez when she was running in 2018. And, it was amazing meeting her. And I felt like we need more women like her in seats of power. And she was definitely talking about the things that matter to me and the Bronx Progressives Collective. So then we ended up endorsing her, and we helped her get on the ballot. We knocked on doors for her at a time when the entire political establishment was against her because they were supporting her opponent. And then, she won, that was great. And like history was made. And I also, through Bronx Progressives and the progressive space in New York City, we also took down the Independent Democratic Conference, which was an arrangement of 8 rogue Democrats that were empowering Republicans to stay in control in Albany. And that was standing in the way of housing regulations, and other pieces of legislation that, were important to people here in my community. And then, we kept on. We removed the IDC people. We supported the insurgents. I'm also an activist with the Housing Justice for All movement space, which was instrumental in fighting for the most progressive pro-tenant rent reform laws that New York State has seen in a generation. And, what I want to say about that is that it's really movements and community organizers that effect change. And the role of politicians is to create a space for the movement space to have a real seat at the table. So if the housing justice movement hadn't pressed on and hadn't organized with the upstate and downstate folks throughout New York State, we wouldn't see these pro-tenant rent reform laws that ended up coming about in 2019, along with the fact that we were able to secure a Democratic majority in Albany. So the electoral space and the movement space need to, meet at the middle, so that the movement space can feel like they have a true ally on the inside that won't sell out the movement when they get to the seat of power. So that's something that I have experience in, I have really good judgment. And I've been standing alongside the movement space and calling out, anybody that needs to be called out, and organizing against entrenched power that is corrupt. I'm the only leading candidate in this race that has rejected real estate developer funding, corporate PAC funding, pharmaceutical funding, and sources of oppressive funding that are kicking our communities out. And that's really important because in a district like ours that's experiencing a gentrification and a displacement crisis, we cannot afford to send sellouts to Washington and places of power that have experiences taking charter school money and oppressive sources of funding that are not in line with the values of our community. And that's what we're seeing in this congressional district race. There are people in this congressional district race taking money from racists, taking money from bigots, taking money from charter schools, taking money from, different sources that, don't have anything to do with the kind of future that the movement space here is trying to build. There are people also in this congressional race that voted against having a presidential debate on climate change in a district that has one of the highest levels of asthma and respiratory illnesses in the entire country. So they use their role in the DNC to vote against having a presidential debate on climate change in the poorest congressional district in the country, where we suffer, from polluted air. So this is what's at stake. This race is really important because Congressmember Jose Serrano is one of the most left-leaning members of Congress. And, this congressional district is used to, under his leadership, to radical visionary leadership that centers the movement space and the grassroots space. And I'm so grateful that I got my career started in public service, learning, from Congressman Serrano, and learning how to lead through listening, and learning how to lead through love and compassion, because I feel like that's what we need in the community right now, and that's something that's missing in our politics. So basically, we have the support in our campaign. People like Bernie Sanders endorsed us last week. We have the endorsement of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We have the endorsement of the New York Working Families Party, the Democratic Socialists of America, and a host of different grassroots movement organizations in New York City and throughout the country, that could have gone with the other elected officials, running in this race. Some of the organizations that I mentioned might have endorsed in the past, but they went with our campaign for a reason. They went with our campaign because we are funding, our campaign and raising money for our campaign in the right way. We're raising it, from the community. We have the highest levels of in-district donations out of anybody who's running in this race. We have the highest level of individual donations throughout the country. And we right now have a transnational movement where other countries, and like people from other countries in the world are dialing in to help us phone bank and reach people. So we have a lot of momentum in this race, and I'm so proud of the race that we've been able to run, because we basically have centered the suffering of the community, and that's been reflected in the way that we fundraise and how intentional we've been to reach out to everybody in this community beyond the Latino community. We're reaching out to the Black American community, the Muslim community, the Yemeni community. And something I want to highlight is our position on foreign policy as well. There are a lot of dangerous narratives that are being taken by the corporate Democrats that are running in this race, as it relates to Israel and Palestine, for instance. I'm the only leading candidate in this race that has taken very strong position on behalf of the Palestinian people, that is centering Palestinian human rights and dignity, and everybody else who's either been a formerly elected official or is currently an elected official has taken very pro-Israel stances that has not given a space for the Palestinian community to have a voice as well. And this is why I have the endorsement of Jewish Voices for Peace, which is an organization that is visionary, and humanistic in its approach to foreign policy as it relates to all things Middle East. And as much as I believe that we need to stand against anti-Semitism and white supremacy, absolutely, we need to stand against that bigotry. But we also need to make sure that we're centering the Palestinian community in every single thing that we do as well, because a peace process that does not include Palestinians in the Middle East is not a legitimate peace process. It needs to be denounced. So the congressional race that I'm running in, and the role of Congress, it's not just a domestic and a local role. It also has an international component as well. And that's something that I learned from Congressman Serrano, because during his time, he basically was visionary, and he reached out to countries like Venezuela to bring subsidized oil to the community here. And that's basically the legacy that as a community, we need to respect and take it to the next level. And I don't think that this congressional district deserves milquetoast centrist leadership that is going to take the community back a couple of steps. We need to preserve Jose Serrano's legacy, protect worker co-ops, fight for environmental justice, social justice, and be inclusive of the diversity that exists here in the community, and be a coalition builder. And one thing I want to say about that is that I'm the only candidate in this race, and probably in New York City, that if you go to my website, I've translated the website into 5 different languages. So if you go to my website, you'll see that it's in English, it's in Spanish, it's in French, out of respect for the big French-speaking African population that's in the district. It's also in Arabic, and it's also in Bangla. So this is like what we've done with our campaign, to be intentional about making sure that we're reaching out to everybody, and that everybody in this community sees themselves reflected in our local, national, and foreign policy.
All right, that was amazing. All right. So I got a lot of questions out of that, right? So first thing, check out LopezForThePeople.com. That is her website. George asks, what can the average person without your experience that are not leaders can do to support this other than voting? What can people do on top of voting to support something like you want to move forward?
Other than voting?
Yeah. On top of voting. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. So voting is definitely important. But what we need to do in the community is stay alert. We need to basically support grassroots activists on the ground, frontline activists that are putting their lives on the line every single day
I
as it
would
relates to things
say,
like criminal justice reform, as
I
it relates to environmental justice. So we need to center the movement space, and we need to center directly impacted people in everything that we do, and seek and look to them for guidance, so that they could like have a real seat at the table and create policies, that will impact people's lives, like we saw in the housing justice for all movement space. And that's connected to voting as well. And it's important to hold elected officials accountable, to hold elected officials accountable as it relates to, the kind of money that they raise for their campaigns, because big money definitely has a corruptive force in our politics. And it definitely impacts the level of advocacy that we send people to positions of power to advocate for us behind the scenes. So if we're supporting people that are basically selling our community out, taking revenue money, and are in the pockets of the real estate developer industry, and are in the pockets of the corporations, and are not being serious about engaging in a real conversation about a redistribution of political economic, wealth that flows from the 1% to the 99% in this country. As much as we organize, we're not going to have the allies that are going to amplify the needs of our movement in positions of power in politics, in government. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that it goes hand in hand. And there needs to be like a co-governance approach where you have politicians that are not there for their own ambitious, career, goals, but are taking the view that public servant leadership is the way to go, and that we have to have the humility to listen to the community and to basically center their voices and their experiences and everything that we do, and look to them for that guidance. And right now, based on what I've seen in the Bronx Democratic establishment and beyond, because this is a national conversation, I'm not seeing that. And that's why you have a lot of insurgent candidates like myself that come up from struggle, that come from the community, trying to do the right thing and really trying to be an ally to the movement space, as we've seen in the civil rights movement, as we saw like in the farm worker movement that Cesar Chavez led. Movements and change always happen from the ground up, and we need real allies, that will amplify those struggles, to give them a voice in places like Congress, City Council. So I would encourage people to vote, but also like stay connected to your community and take guidance from frontline activists that are risking their lives every single day to fight for our dignity and to fight for our humanity as a community and as a country.
so I hear that a lot. Like, as a person that wasn't involved in politics at all, when I hear support the activists, I don't understand what that means as a regular person. Like, does that mean go out, march with them, help fund them more than, other things? What would you say is the way to support? What's a way to easily tell people to support an activist?
Well, definitely, not watering down pieces of legislation that they bring to you, for instance, right? So right now in this race, there's candidates that watered down a piece of legislation in the city council called Right to Know, that was basically about police accountability, and it was a landmark piece of legislation that was given to a city council member here that's running in this race. And what he decided to do is turn his back on the over 200 organizations and individuals and directly impacted people in the criminal justice space, to water down that piece of legislation significantly without consulting, the people in the community that gave him the piece of legislation. I'm talking about Richie Torres.
Mm.
So what I'm saying is that is a way that we can support the activist community. You support the activist community by being honest. You support the activist community by being on board and being, truthful about, what's going on. And you support the activist space by being an ally and letting them know at every step of the way what is going on, right? When you're negotiating, something that they're bringing to you, because it was activists that basically conceived of this, piece of legislation, and they entrusted the city council members that they gave this piece of legislation to shepherd it, to guide it, to make sure that, you know, it basically reflected like what they've been putting themselves on the line for. So basically, you know, that's a great example of how we can support the activist movement space, to be honest with them and to be a real partner, and to develop, you know, the seeds of trust, and relationship building. And, you know, that's a great example of how you can support. And also, as we've been seeing with the national protests around George Floyd, you know, one of the things that many people are doing for activists is providing jail support, providing food, providing bail support to people that are, you know, rightfully protesting these conditions. I think it's also, you know, giving people, you know, a space to be themselves, listening to people, and supporting in that way. So that's something that we should continue to do as a community, because it's really hard doing this. And sometimes when you're organizing against the fray, like against the status quo, it's very easy to be marginalized. It takes a psychological and emotional toll on you. And I can say this because, you know, I've experienced that in my political organizing. You know, people have tried to get me fired when I, you know, was, you know, working. And people have done, you know, many different things to other activists that are speaking truth to power. And, you know, you should know this too. This is something that's just well known. So the fact that you're organizing and that you are placing the community first in everything that you do, should not be grounds for you to be targeted, should not be grounds for you to be intimidated, as very oftentimes happens in Bronx politics and beyond. So we need to, you know, cut that at the root and basically, you know, take back our politics. And the way you take back your politics is by fundraising in a way that represents the values of the community, and making sure that we identify directly impacted people with those lived experiences to be able to run for different positions in politics, so that we can identify community experts to be county committee members, to be district leaders, to, you know, be the next county chair. Because right now we need to fight as a community to make sure that our local party is fighting for the values and the needs. And we need to make sure that there's actual community engagement, and all that good stuff. So those are, you know, ways that I can think of, to support. And also, you know, going after bad players as well. There are people in this race that are running as Republicans dressed in Democratic clothing. And, you know, for the, like 2 years ago, I, you know, got together local Democrats of New York and Bronx Progressives to remove Ruben Diaz Sr. from the party, because he's someone that does not reflect the values of the Democratic Party. So I'm the only candidate that organized to eject him from the party at a time when there's other candidates in this race. So I turns within the community, we have to lead with our values.
Internet problems. So George asks, humility to listen is big. I just get concerned that even the most progressive candidates do not take the time to listen. The key for me is creating a platform that talks in plain English, that engages everyone, especially those that disagree with you, especially when we want the same things in the end. So that's part of why I created the show, George, because a lot of times I feel just like you. I don't know everything. I know people that are everybody will tell you they want to make things better. So I am trying to figure out how to make that happen. So Samelys, we had a question. I know your internet went out. We had a question.
We got disconnected. Can you hear me?
I hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, good. Yeah, and I got disconnected and I went back in the studio. So I missed the last piece of what you said.
So basically what I was saying is there's a comment that asked, you know, humility to listen is big. So the person is his name is George. He's saying he gets concerned with the progressive candidates where they don't take time to listen to the other side, which is not to say the super right, but to figure out a key to making sure people can understand in plain English how to help, right? So that's part of what this show I'm trying to basically, because I am one of those people. I know AOC. I understand what she wants. I remember when she sat in front of me and told me what she wants, and I was like, I can't see how any human being would not want the same things you want right now. So I don't understand where the miscommunication is. And then as she started telling me more and more, I was like, I just think you need to explain to the people, like, step by step what it is that you're trying to do. She ended up winning, and now she gets to do that every day. But as you're like the next, up. She's said that you are her candidate. How can you let people know?
She says I'm the homie.
Say it again. Okay, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear you. Say that again. You're on mute.
Hello?
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
You're coming in and out. I feel like there's a bad connection on your end. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? I can hear you a little bit better now.
Okay, I hear you better now too. So basically what I was saying is there a...
So the question was how to listen?
No, how to create a space where there's the back and forth from people that don't fully understand the difference, right? And I'm one of them, right? I understand what the end goal is, but I think a lot of people want the same things. They just don't understand the path to get there. And it seems like what happens in politics is there's different routes to it. Everybody believes they're doing the best thing, I believe, but they don't, like, the regular person doesn't fully understand the difference of how to get there to choose the candidate that will help them get there, I believe. And the next question is, or people who honestly may not support, right? So part of it is, as a person that has seen, the Democrat Republican thing, there's some people who are just never going to support. But I guess the more that you can help educate them, and even me, I go every day, I'm fighting with people on Facebook, but you're never going to turn those people around. You just want to give them information. So what do you think you're going to be able to do differently to make sure there's a space to have those conversations that helps people understand more? Like, everything you said makes sense, but I don't understand at the lowest level how to help. And even that's what the comment is, right? How can we, because when you answer the question, you answered about Richie Torres, but he's a public official. A regular person, you did answer by saying support the activists, but how day to day can someone support the path that you and, like, the AOCs of the world are trying to make work? You understand what I mean? I don't know if that's easy. If that makes sense. Does it make sense, my question?
Yeah. So basically, in our platform, we keep things, very simple, that's accessible to the community. And our platform is based on thousands of conversations that we've had with people in the community that are struggling with homelessness, that are struggling with lack of food in their homes, that are struggling with lack of health care. So one of the things that we've been doing is phone banking, and asking people what they need, asking people if they have enough food at home. We've revamped our website as a candidate, that's running for this seat, to basically empower people that are going through such situations. And we have our volunteers basically, like, give them access and walk them through how to access city services, how to apply for food stamps, how to apply for Medicaid in the time of the coronavirus. And we've actually hosted a few town halls that we've invited the community to share their stories about what they're going through, and we've invited experts to help guide them in terms of how to access these benefits, and how to access, like, worker rights if they're being harassed at work, with attorneys, with people that are experts in social service advocacy, to make sure that these services that they've paid into the system already, so that they can access these services. So we've been basically doing constituent services from the onset of the coronavirus on, discreetly. And if you go to our website, you'll see that we have put a lot of resources there for people in the community that are experiencing, a lot of issues. And I personally have delivered groceries to people at their doorstep, and other volunteers, obviously, like, practicing social distancing, to be there for the community. And the most important platform that I'm fighting for, it's called the Homes Guarantee Platform. I don't know if you had a chance to go to my website at lopezforthepeople.com to check it out. But that is an amazing platform that was actually put together by formerly homeless people, directly impacted people on the verge of being homeless, that came together to envision a strong housing policy that's bold, that reflects the kind of homes that they want to live in. So I think that the way of doing legislation is really like continuously seeking out those perspectives and just organizing. Community organizing is probably, the number one tool that we have to create change and to figure out what are the issues that are happening in the community that we need to be highlighting, and using a platform like this and the platform that you have to basically amplify what the struggles are. Because chances are, if one person is experiencing something, many other people in the community are experiencing the same thing. So it's really important to create that space for people to share their stories so that we could transform our government in a way that's accessible to them. So when you say things like, housing justice for all, like healthcare for all, like everybody in the community understands that right now, in light of what's happening with the coronavirus, healthcare is not something that should be tied to whether you have a job or not, because there's so many people that don't have jobs right now because of the crisis. So this is a time as ever. And we've received confirmation from the voters in this district that, they want to have single payer universal health care. They want to reorganize the economy in a way that guarantees economic.
Oh, she got cut out. So anyone else that has questions for Samelys, what I'm about to ask her is how do you start to get involved in community organizing, right?
Got cut off
Um,
again. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I have T-Mobile. I know that there was like a national
yeah, that was a problem.
outage in the other day.
Yeah,
So I don't know if that's maybe what's impacting my internet service. So I apologize. I've
no
been coming
problem.
in and out.
No, I think it really is makes it hard. The question is, can you hear me? Hello. Uh-oh. Lost her again. T-Mobile. So if you don't know, yesterday there was a huge T-Mobile problem across the country. I don't know if they're still dealing with it, but basically, all right. George has another. When she wins, she should have a town hall of people who don't support her at all for her to explain to the people that when she wins, they will not be lost. They will not have lost. They have not lost. I need to learn how to read. So yeah, I guess as a person that this is called the Entrepreneur Hour, right? I'm trying to create something where people understand the connection of politics, and having a place to live is pretty important. Uh,
I have to apologize. I'm having internet issues. I have T-Mobile service, and I think yesterday there was like some kind of an outage. I
yep,
think I may be experiencing, these issues. So I apologize. I keep coming in and out.
it's fine.
But
It's
but
been
yeah, to round out my response, basically, like we have to listen, we have to do things. I have an urban planning background. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is organizing things like, visioning sessions to figure out the kind of future that the community like wants to build for itself. And organizing those kind of sessions to figure out like what people are going through, what ideas people have. Because let me tell you, like there's a lot of intelligent people in this community, and you don't necessarily need to have like 3 degrees to say that you're intelligent. There's regular people here in the community that may not have access to a college degree or master's degree, and that's totally fine because college is not for everybody. That are regular people from the community working, to survive and build their lives, that have amazing insights. And I'm so excited at the possibility of being able to be the next congressperson to basically do like different visioning sessions throughout the district to figure out like what ideas people have, like what ideas for laws people have that they want us to enact as part of our office. And ways that we can streamline constituent services, and even ways that we can work locally here at the state level and at the city level to bring about change. Because we need, for instance, a lot of funding for NYCHA, and that's definitely a federal issue. But we also need to work in partnership with the state and with the local authorities here in New York to make sure that we get all of the funding that the low-hanging fruit. So right now, there's millions and millions of dollars in funding that are owed to NYCHA from New York State. So that's something that, we need to keep pushing on, in addition to all the federal funding that is owed. And I just want to shout out that we need to repeal something that's called the Fair Cloth Amendment, that is basically, preventing public housing construction from going on in New York State and nationally. So we need to do that. We need to decarbonize NYCHA. We need to make it greener. And we need to fight for a homes guarantee. And a homes guarantee is basically saying, let's build 12 million units of housing over the next 10 years so that we can eradicate homelessness in America. And let's build housing that's not necessarily driven as it is driven by making sure that, we house people. Because in the richest country in the world, there should not be any homelessness. There should not be living on the streets and going through situations that I went through when I was growing up. And many people here in the congressional district, like, identify with my story, with the platform that we're fighting for, because they're going through those things right now. I am running for Congress right now, and I don't have health care because I left my job to dedicate myself to this full time.
Wow.
And I think that, regardless of what happens in this race, like, we need to make it easy for regular working class people to be able to run for any kind of political office, because the elected officials that are running in this race right now, they have their salaries, right? They're not worried about rent. They're not worried about healthcare and all these other things that take up a lot of mental space. So we need to basically, guarantee healthcare, like childcare, for any candidate who's running. And at the congressional level, one of the things that I'm fighting for that's already on my platform is public matching at the congressional level, and term limits as well, because there's people here that, have been here for like 40 years, 50 years. So it's really important to kind of like have that turnover. So I think that we should explore public matching like we have in the New York City Council level, at the federal level, and explore term limits as well. And definitely, take away the influence of big money in politics, because that's something that I have to tell you is so backwards, and it's disrespectful to people here in the community that are activists, that are suffering every single day. And typically what happens is that when you take that kind of money, you're beholden to the donors. So I want to be beholden to the voters of this district, not any donor, not Rebney, not pharmaceutical companies, no charter schools, right? I want to be accountable to the people of this district. And like I said earlier, I have the highest level of in-district donations in this congressional district. And I'm really proud of that, because there's people that live in NYCHA that donate $2 and $3 to our campaign because they believe in the Homes Guarantee platform and believe in what we're trying to do for NYCHA. And they trust our commitment to continue to work with the Housing Justice for All space to bring about that change and keep those conversations, where they need to be, So, I want to say that. And also, like, home ownership is something that's really important. Community land trusts, and making sure that communities are basically the ones that create, like, job opportunities in the neighborhood, like through worker co-ops, and that create pathways so that people can share wealth and build equity together. And that's something that I really love about community land trusts, that's a way for people to not only like create equity, but like to have a real say and a sense of ownership in their communities, that'll hopefully do something to stop the tide of gentrification and displacement.
So there's a question that said, what they would do is invite people that disagree with whatever politics you're and start to talk to them about the disagreement to see if there's a way to start to educate more, right? So that's one thing. I don't know if that's possible. The other thing
I think that's definitely possible, and that's something that we've been doing already. As my work as a regular activist, like through Bronx Progressives, like Local Democrats of New York, educating people about the local political process, because we're always gonna disagree, right? Like, that's normal. I think it's weird when you just agree on everything. I mean, that's not realistic. So I think it's really important to continue to have conversations. It's even important to reach across the aisle and consider working with Republicans and other parties, right? I know, for instance, like something that AOC did with Ted Cruz is that they're working together to make sure that if you're an elected official, you don't end up being like a corporate lobbyist, right? So those are interesting things and collaborations that we could be exploring. And something else that I want to talk about is that I do something that's called call time to raise money for campaigns, for my campaign, to raise money for mailers and things like that. And I call donors throughout the country to ask them for resources so we can get our word out there in the community. But I also talk to donors about what they're going through in their community as well. So I've been speaking to people from Alaska, from Mississippi, from the Midwest, from Florida, from, like Binghamton in New York, to figure out, okay, so in addition to you giving me a little bit of funds so I can get the word out, I want to know what's going on in your community, because if I get to Congress, I want to be able to work with your constituencies to bring about change. And I've learned about so many issues that are going on in the country right now because of that. And in Alaska, for instance, they're struggling with climate justice. That's something that's really, really important to them because, as we all know, climate change is real and the ice caps are melting, and the permafrost in Alaska right now is melting. And why is that dangerous? Because permafrost to them is basically like what bedrock is for us here, like in the Bronx. There's a lot of, the bedrock is the foundation, and the permafrost is their bedrock, and the permafrost is melting. So that means that they're building on top of this permafrost. And over the course of time, as climate change, becomes a thing and the climate gets warmer, that's going to melt over time. So I learned this on a donor call because I took it upon myself to be humble and ask, so what are the issues that are going on in your community? Because I want to make sure that if I get to Congress, my constituents and your constituents in Alaska and Arizona and Mississippi can work together so we can find common ground, so that we can organize, on the needs and the values that are important to us. So I don't know if any other people are taking that approach, but I am, and I got to tell you, I've learned a lot. In Arizona, immigration is definitely a huge issue that, the progressive and grassroots community out there cares so deeply about. The issue of gun control is really relevant. Obviously, the issues with police brutality is relevant in Minneapolis right now. So these are the kind of conversations that I've been having. And it's just really about having that humility and that curiosity to ask. So what is it that you're going through and how can we work together? So that's the approach that I take to leadership. My leadership style is collective. And it's based on consensus, and it's based on getting input from people here in the community and throughout the country around things that we need to be fighting for. Because there are politicians that are standing in the way of progress, like Mitch McConnell, like others, even some Democrats also. A lot of Democrats are saying, the most dangerous thing that we have right now is Trump. If we eliminate Trump, we'll be good. But no, that's actually not true, because Trump can be gone tomorrow. But the, structural issues and the corruption that currently plagues the corporate, the Democratic corporate wing of our party is going to continue. So again, we can move Trump, tomorrow, but these same issues will exist because the Democratic Party of today, is Republican light. So we have to basically, return to the working class roots of our community, of our party. And, in my view, I'm a person that I don't put party over people. I put people over party. And I think that that's what we need to do. We need a mass movement of mass working class politics to take over this country. And we do need a political, economic, and social revolution from the ground up, where you have working class people making the demands and organizing for what they want, because it's workers and marginalized people that create the wealth in this country. And that's something that as a society we need to come to terms with, because it's corporate lobbyists and the corporate elite and the political elite that basically write the laws as it relates to our economy. So we need to make sure that we engage in practices like economic democracy, so that we could ensure that the economy is organized for the common worker, so that we can get our economic rights in the form of housing, healthcare for all, and childcare as a right, so that we can get the resources that we need to invest in our collective goods and spaces, in our schools, in our recreation centers. And I think it's a reshifting of our cultural values as well, like prioritizing what's important. There's a lot of people, for instance, that take care of, their grandparents, or, people that are sick at home, that, they take care of those people. So like, the profession of the care professions is something that needs to be highlighted, and we need to fight for
Yeah.
domestic workers. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's basically like reorganizing our society and making sure that we're centering the values and that we're fighting for working people, and not the elite. And that the elite, we need to tax the elite. We need to tax the rich. We need to take away from the rich, plainly, and give to the poor. And we need to basically engage in conversations around the implementation of the wealth tax, financial transaction taxes. We need to eliminate the capital gains preference tax as well. That basically rewards really wealthy people, when they make passive income with their investments, and that are taxed actually at a lower rate than a waitress, than a worker working at a factory. So if we basically advocate and use our platforms to take on these corporations and, like reorganize our economy in a way that suits workers, that's the way to go. Like, we need to fight for a people's bailout, not a corporate bailout, which is what we've seen historically. We also need to make sure that we fight to repeal the tax cuts that were instituted in the Bush administration and currently right now in the Trump administration, so we can raise some of that revenue so we can fight for the programs and the services that are needed in this country, in our communities. So these are the conversations that we need to have. And then when you take money from corporations and real estate lobbyists, you're not going to have an incentive to have those real conversations because you're beholden to those donors, and they basically own you. But when you raise money from your community in the way that's clean, that centers what your community is going through, it gives you the independence and the moral and political courage to fight for these issues and to give them the platform that they deserve.
That makes sense. So this show is called the Entrepreneur Hour. I wouldn't be a good host. What do you think the entrepreneurship community can do to help you, or you're going to do for the entrepreneurship community once you get in, if you get in?
I think I mentioned it, throughout this conversation. I'm a strong believer in worker cooperatives, and like I said before I jumped on to this interview, I'm personally not a business owner. So, I think that my role is to listen to the business community to see how we can be of service right now as it relates to the coronavirus response. That was a travesty. There were a lot of people in our community, that are longstanding business owners that didn't get the resources because the resources that flowed from the federal government ended up going to big box retail stores and not the local mom and pop shops. I've been having conversations with community leaders that are business owners here, and they said that when they went to try to get loans, they were looked at really funny. They were like, well, I don't know if we can underwrite this loan for you because I don't know if you're going to be able to pay it back. And, the person that told me that said that it was probably because she's right, and she doesn't fit the typical profile of what these white corporatist underwriters look for as it relates to making sure that these loan funds get to the community. So there's a lot of racism that we need to contend with, and we need to center the business community, especially if they're leaders here, if they engage in job creation. I think that we need to continue to support the worker cooperative movement as well, because that's something that the community that's here, that's something that's actually really good for immigrant communities, the worker co-op movement. Because what happens is, with the immigrant communities, so some of them are undocumented, they don't have like an economic path. And then I believe that the worker cooperative structure is something that, can help them get to where they need to be. So I think that there's legislation already that was introduced by Christian Gillibrand, I believe, at the federal level around work. So we need to basically like take that to the next level so that we can invest in people here in the community that want to create the jobs of the future. And I'm also a proponent of the marijuana as well. I think that we need to make sure that communities that have been incarcerated because of our racialized criminal justice system are the first ones that get access to the marijuana justice economy, so that they can basically like form their own worker cooperatives around marijuana justice. So we need to like fully legalize and decriminalize, any
what's best for people, right? Oh, what's best for people. Any politician I talk to, Republican or Democrat, they all believe they're doing what's best for the people. The real trick,
Kicked out again. I got kicked out again. But yeah, worker cooperatives, definitely. Marijuana justice economy, making sure that people that have been incarcerated because of marijuana possession are the ones that get the first dibs, and making sure that they reap the benefits from the marijuana, just from the marijuana economy that, you know, is being created already. So that's really important. And I want to give a shout out to a piece of legislation that's in the New York City Council that's called the Small Jobs Business Survival Act, which is basically a piece of legislation that every entrepreneur and small business in the community should know about. That's basically saying that we need long-term leases for about 10 years for small businesses, because a really big fear of small businesses is that they don't have commercial lease protection,
yep,
and that a lot of the landlords' property taxes are floated to them as well.
yep,
And there's a lot of extortion that's happening in the immigrant community, that, quite frankly, the bids are not looking into, and local chambers of commerce are not looking into. So I encourage everybody to research that piece of legislation, so you can encourage all of your city council members, if you're a small business owner listening to this program, so that they can do the right thing and pass this piece of legislation that's been, you know, in the city council for like years and years. And you have people running in this race that haven't taken it to the finish line in their role as city council members. So that's really, really important for you to know, because again, if that legislation would were to become a law, that would mean guaranteed 10-year leases. Because think about it, like only if your lease is only going to be renewed for like a year or two, that's not going to give you a long-term path to build your business. Because then whatever clientele you meet in the first 2 years of whatever that lease is enacted, and then it expires, you know, and if you're kicked out because you can't afford the rent, where's your clientele? So a long-term commercial lease is important, at least 10 years, and making sure that we're fighting against a greedy real estate developer industry that basically like targets small businesses when they feel like they want to bring in another business that can pay more rent, to kick them out. We need to prevent the gentrification that's happening right now in our small businesses, and make sure that we create mechanisms through the legislative process to make sure that they're able to stay in the community, because the small businesses are the bedrock of our neighborhoods. So I wanted to, you know, throw that out there and fight against the extortion that property owners and landlords in the real estate industry are inflicting upon poor, like, immigrant startups that are trying to do the right thing and building a future for themselves in the community. And these are the kinds of things that, like, you know, you, me, because independent media is so important. I want to give you a shout out. Thank you so much for having me on your show, because independent media is so critical. Like, as a community of color, like Black and brown community, we need people like you to, you know, share our stories, to put these things out there, because the corporate media is not on our side. So I've been blasting the corporate media also throughout this race, because they've been trying to minimize my campaign and undermine my campaign. So it's really important for people like me, if I were to be successful in this race, to continue to support independent local media from the community like you. So I just want to, you know, tell you that I appreciate you for giving me this space to talk about these issues. But yeah, for any small business owner, look at the Small Jobs Business Survival Act at the city council level, and make sure that you tell everybody that you know to call your city council member to put that on the table, so that we can protect our small businesses from being displaced in the community.
So I've definitely been affected by that, and I know it. So yes, what she's saying is 100% right, because as the gentrification comes, the rents are gonna grow, and if your lease is less than 10 years, your rent is gonna grow, and you're gonna be out of luck. So last 5 minutes, what's the final ask? What anything you could, anybody in the audience can do for you, I can do for you, and any way that people can find you other than your website, or support what you're doing.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, if you like our message, or you feel like we're, you know, fighting for the people, which is what we have been doing since day one, definitely go to the website, follow us at Samelys Lopez on Instagram, on Twitter, at Samelys Lopez NYC on Facebook. If you like what we're talking about, if you like what we stand for, reach out to everybody that you know in these last few days leading up to the June 23rd election to let them know that there is an authentic, real working class champion that's rejected sources of oppressive funding because I want to be accountable to you, to the community. If I were to win this election, I promise anyone who's watching that I will fight like hell for you in Congress. And I will continue to be centered by my personal lived experiences with, everything that I've witnessed growing up, everything that I saw my mom go through. That's not unique to us as a family. That is actually something that unfortunately is very common. So you can trust that I'm going to take those experiences to Washington, and I'm going to, center our suffering and translate that suffering into collective action for everybody who's watching this program that happens to live in the 15th Congressional District. You have my word. And if I were to win this election, I want to work with you. I want to build. I want to listen to you. I want to, do the visioning sessions that I was talking about earlier. I want you to educate me on what you think I should be fighting for in Congress. And I want you to let me know what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong so that we can build together. And I want you to know that if I were to win this seat, like, I'm not going to change things from, like day to night. It's a long-term process. And it's like, a long journey, but you have my commitment that I will use my platform to center the voices of the oppressed. And I will use my platform to challenge the establishment. And I will use my platform to challenge the corporate elite and engage in conversations that, bring about a radical redistribution of wealth in our country. So that's my commitment to you. Y para las personas que no hablan inglés y están viendo el programa, mi nombre es Samelys Lopez y me estoy postulando para ser la próxima congresista en el distrito número 15. Me encantaría que se integraran a nuestra campaña. Estamos luchando para que se haga una garantía de viviendas, vivienda para todos, seguro médico para todos y el cuidado de los niños para todos. Pueden ir a mi sitio web es.lopezforthepeople.com para que se integren. Soy puertorriqueña y dominicana y si me eligen, sería la primera dominicana en ser congresista en la historia de los Estados Unidos, que eso es algo que es bien importante, que necesitamos representación latina y afro-latina también en la comunidad. Así que me encantaría contar con su apoyo. And something else actually that I want to say before I leave the show, I know that I'm running a little bit out of time, is that I don't know if you know about the redistricting commission.
No.
Do you know about that?
No, I don't.
So the redistricting commission is a commission that basically charts the political boundaries every 10 years, and that's based on population. Right now, that redistricting commission doesn't have any Afro-Latino, Afro-Latina, Latina representation. And you have leaders here in the Bronx Democratic establishment that could have, made the case, because in the congressional district that I'm running in is 66% Latino, Afro-Latino, Garifuna. And, the fact that we don't have any.
Oh, damn. T-Mobile. She's going to come back. I'm going to let her finish that because I didn't know that. 66%. Wow. That's pretty crazy. What I was saying is the politicians, they all want to do well for us. At least that's what I hope, right? They just don't really have the same idea of how to do it. So you have to pick the politician you believe has the same idea that you do.
Sorry, I got kicked out again. But definitely reach out to Governor Cuomo, reach out to Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who's the Democratic Senate Majority Leader, to demand that there be Afro-Latino representation at the redistricting commission, because that's really important, because right now the Latino community, Afro-Latino community is a big community, and our experiences as a community cannot be erased at the political level. So we need to organize to make sure that everybody, for the Black American community, the African community, the Afro-Latino community, Latino community, what have you, Southeast Asian community, has equal representation as it relates to the drawing of our political boundaries. And that's really important that the community needs to know. And that's relevant because here in the Bronx, our experiences are being removed from the conversation. And we need to fight for our dignity, and we need to fight for political representation that doesn't diminish us. So I wanted to put that out. But yeah, if you like what we're talking about, lopezforthepeople.com, intégrese a la campaña. Soy del Bronx, no de Manhattan. Hay mucha gente que se están postulando que son de Manhattan, que son de East Harlem o de Washington Heights. Yo soy aquí del sur del Bronx. Me crecí en Poplar Avenue, por los lados de Bronx Lebanon Hospital. Así que estamos aquí para servir. Para adelante y para atrás y para coger impulso.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Gracias.
Good luck. And tell AOC I said hi and keep rocking. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep up the fight. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to push it regardless of what happens. Thank you so much for your time today. Gracias. And tell George Torres I said hello. I saw him asking a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I worked under George Torres in the New York City Council District under Jose M. Serrano. So, you know, George and I go way back.
Oh, wow. Amazing. All right.
Gracias.
Thank you. Bye. Now have a good day.
Okay.